Welcome to the course, How to Get a Killer Vocal Sound. My name is Gary Gray. I'm a producer who's worked in the Hollywood and LA area for the last 30 years. The course is going to cover three main areas. One is the philosophy of vocal recording, production, mixing, and mastering. Two, your priorities. And three, the steps to take in order to carry those priorities out. Let's get right into it. All right, you'll see here that we have a song that I'm in the middle of actually producing. It's called Hearts in Memphis, and it's by actually a member of How to License Your Music Premium.com, Ron Kempton, a student of mine and a client. So this is a great song. It's acoustic guitar centric. It's using a vocalist who is a professional singer and who was hired by Ron. And he sent me the stems. So let's talk about the philosophy of how to get a killer vocal sound. All right? Just stop this for a moment. I wanted you to get a feel for the song in the background here. All right, let's talk about the philosophy of how to get a killer vocal sound. There are two hats that anyone in a studio wears, know it or not, when you're actually working on music production. Now, most people actually wear only one of those hats, from my observation, and doing this for 30 years and teaching for 30 years. Okay, the two hats are producer and engineer. Back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and earlier, there was always two people, a producer and an engineer. And that's because of all the things that had to be done with tape machines and outboard gear. And there was a lot of work that had to be done, even editing. You had to take the tape off the reels and use a razor blade and tape. And there was lots of work for the engineer to do while the producer worked with the artists. Now, with computers, everything's instant. Recall is instant. You don't have to set up a session. You boot it up and there it is. What happened was when computers came along, the job of the engineer and the producer became kind of one. You could do both. Now, most people in their home studios and even in professional studios, when they're behind the board or behind their computer, they're wearing the hat of engineer. Now, the engineer is the guy with his nose on the screen that goes down rabbit holes, that fixes things, that edits things, that mixes things, that has fun working with the details and the nitty-gritty stuff. And it can be a lot of fun. I mean, it can almost be addictive sometimes. I mean, you know how time goes by, right? Here's the problem, is that you're wearing two hats, know it or not, like I said. The other hat is producer. So what's the producer compared to the engineer? And this has a lot to do with vocal production, besides all production. The hat requires one to be able to sit back, look at the big picture, make big decisions, and be objective about the entire process of what's going on. So the producer doesn't go down those rabbit holes, right? He stays away from them. And he tries to grab the engineer by the scruff of the neck and pull his head out of those rabbit holes every once in a while. I mean, sometimes he's got to go down there to get stuff handled. But mostly, the producer is there to keep the entire project on the rails, moving forward, and keeping the best interest of the entire project, the big picture in mind. So I'll give you an example. Here we're talking about vocal production. Okay, so this was a song that was sent to me with stem files. And so the first thing I had to do was bring up the stem files, get a decent balance on a rough mix, and listen. And the first thing I'm going to listen to, because it's a song with a singer, is the singer, okay? Not just the vocals. See, the engineer is going to listen to the vocals, like the vocal track. He's going to go, okay, what can I do with the vocal track? The producer listens to the singer. And the first big picture, big decision that's made is this. Is this singer good enough? Now, some of this might sound a little brutal, but the producer's got to be there. He has to be a leader, and he has to make the big, brutal calls. So is this singer good enough to make a professional presentation of this song to the degree that he's going to move the listener emotionally, and he's going to actually cause the listener to get lost in the song, get emotionally moved, have a story told, get chills? Is the singer good enough on this song to create that result? Okay, So let's take a listen to this one. Let's take a look at it from the viewpoint of the producer. All right? So here we go again. Here we go. This is after a rough mix I set up, at least.
Sun sits down on Union. Class of 55 reunion.
Okay, that's all I needed to hear. When I heard this, I was into it. I wanted to hear more. The singer was, it's not just that is the quality of his voice good. Is he singing the right notes? That's not what I mean, not just technically. Emotionally, he was actually moving me, and like it was appropriate for this style. And that's a decision that you have to make. Now, some of us, and I've done it myself, though I'm not, normally a lead vocalist. I have sung lead vocals. I do a lot of background vocals. I mean, somehow I even won a song contest, a singer-songwriter category for a song that I sang on. And to be honest with you, a lot of it is just how I produced it. But most of it was I got into it emotionally, even though I'm not a great singer. So you don't have to use or be a great singer, but you do have to put out a great emotional performance. And I would say this is a great emotional performance. So that's the first thing about vocal production, is the knowledge of the hat that needs to be worn more than the other hat. That's producer, more than engineer. And the willingness, to actually wear that hat. Okay, so the philosophy was this, basically. The philosophy of good vocal production is that there must be a producer present in the room along with the engineer. The engineer can't run this whole thing. You usually will not end up with an optimum vocal track if you're just being the engineer. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes made for people who are struggling or not consistent with getting radio-ready mixes, especially vocal production. So I'm going to show you right now how you can A-B in terms of vocal production. So I have up here an arranger track, and this is in Cubase. You can set this up in any DAW. I use an arranger track here in Cubase, and here's how you do it. These tracks, I was able to get to this point quickly because I was A-Bing. And I found it's the number one thing that people can get lazy about. And the reason I say that is I teach A-Bing. I came up with all these different ways to A-B and processes and curriculums of A-Bing. And if I sometimes have the attitude like, well, no, I don't need A-B right now. I know it happens to other people. Okay, so it's a discipline. And when you keep it in, whenever I keep A-Bing in and I keep using it during mixing and mastering, I get stuff done fast. The quality is radio ready. I get approvals. I get licensing. I make money. People are happy. The frustration goes away. So A-B, okay? All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you something that I developed called a duet A-B. And it's an amazing process because, now, make sure that you understand this about A-Bing. A-Bing doesn't mean matching. Some people think, now, unless you want to match something, if you like the breathiness of a vocal, the range of the vocal, you want to match it, okay, then go for it. A-Bing is comparing. When I'm A-Bing and mastering, I'm not going to change the volume or anything about my reference track because I'm trying to get my master up to that master. But if I have a commercially mastered track that I've pulled into my mix and I'm using it as a reference, then I need to take that reference track and bring it down to the volume of my mix. And here's a little trick. And I'll just say one thing about it before we move on. And it's probably the most important thing I'll say, really, in this particular course, or any course. Sometimes people don't do it at all. Good luck.
Harmonies ease and flow to jaspos.
Okay, so I found those two phrases. And now I'm going to play it all together. And this is going to be the duet A-B. Check this out. A great tool to get excellent vocal production. You'll never hear your favorite reference tracks the same again. So this is an amazing tool. It's something I just discovered actually kind of by accident one day. And I tried it. I tried to match in there, and I went back to my song, and it was so much better, the quality, and it went so much faster.
I know a girl. Sun sits down on Union. I know a girl. Sun sits down on Union.
Okay, excellent. So once you've got that, kind of squared away and in the ballpark, now you'll keep going back there if you're smart, and you'll just keep getting it closer and closer. So let's take a look now at the next priority. Okay, the next priority has to do with 3 aspects of your vocal track. The first is timing, so the rhythm of the singer. The second one is volume. Certain notes, you'll actually see even transients and plosives and S's, T's, P's, B's. The volume even of those smaller units of the words, even breaths, okay? That's the second of these 3 elements of the vocal performance. So again, first is rhythm, which is timing. The second one is volume. And the third is tuning. So if a vocalist is just too out of tune, if you're doing rap or if you're doing pop and R&B and stuff, you can just go to town and just do the extreme auto-tuning. That's correct, for that style. In this style here, I chose this style because there's not a lot of music going on, so you can hear the vocal production. But, I work in all styles. So if we were doing a pop song now, I'd be doing some drastic auto-tuning. Here, I'm just listening for, and here's what's key, what you're listening for. Big mistake, keeping your attention and focus on a small loop and not listening and feeling the flow of your song. I'm going to tell you right now my definition of a finished track, because that's what we're going for. A finished track is a track that has no emotional weak links for the listener from the first note to the final moment of silence in that track. So all the way through. In order to achieve that standard, the producer and engineer have to, by definition, listen through the whole song. Now, you would be surprised how many people working on music production. Now check this out. How many people never, I'm not kidding you, never listen to their track from the beginning to the end, which is kind of preposterous, right? You don't believe it. Think about it for a minute. Just seriously, look back. How many times have you listened to your track during production and right after you're done from the first moment? Okay? So if what we're going for is the definition of a finished track, again, which is no emotional weak links for the listener from the first note to the final moment of silence. That tells us at once that flow of music will tell us if there's an emotional drop. And you can't feel or hear the flow if it's a small little loop. Oh, that becomes like a song. And did you ever notice that? You loop over and over and over, and you're like, hey, that's kind of cool. And everything sounds great. And then when you go back to the beginning of the song and listen to this thing that you worked on for a few hours, sometimes it sounds like crap because it sounded cool on its own, but it doesn't flow with the song. So here we go. You got my point. We're going to go from the beginning now. Listening to the flow and the volume of these vocals. Let's see how. It's the first words in the song. It's important.
Sun sits down on Union.